Welcome to Planning as a Strategy, Tips from Fractional Executive. This event is hosted by AcornOak, a community and marketplace of fractional executive women, and you have in front of you 4 of the members. For those not yet in the know about this groundbreaking future of work trend, embracing fractional executive is nothing short of a business revolution. They are a game changer for businesses. You have now the ability to hire executives like marketing experts, revenue strategies, tech guru, or even HR wizards for just 1 to 3 days a week without spending a fortune. They're really the perfect and secret tool for times when your business is growing, changing, or in need of a turnaround. They bring fresh idea without getting caught up in office politics, and can even keep your business on track while you search for a full-time executive. So I hope that this was helpful. We've got a number of questions when some of you registered about what is fractional. Today, we are thrilled to invite you to an hour of engaging insights and discussion. And for a greater value of this event for you, we will use a case study, which will be presented by Dasha, our host, in just a few minutes. But before we begin, let me introduce you to our host and our panel. I'd like you to meet Chief Strategy and Planning Officer Dasha Tishlek, and our host today. Throughout her experience, Dasha has collaborated closely with numerous CEOs and founders, helping them bring their vision to life through strategic planning, implementing new processes, and coaching executives to achieve success. Thank you for being our host today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You will also hear Dr. Kruti Lehenbauer, Chief Data Analytics Officer, who's recognized as a strategic mastermind, effortlessly decoding complex data analysis and research to deliver actionable insight. Welcome, Kruti.
Thank you so much. Really excited to be here.
Michelle Page, Chief Business Development Officer, with a holistic approach to solving B2B sales organization challenges. Michelle helps clients achieve ambitious revenue goals and overcome complex sales and marketing obstacles. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Virginie. I'm always excited to talk about sales and revenue growth.
And finally, myself, I'm a Chief Marketing Officer who leverages my passion and expertise in Web3 to design digital marketing funnel strategies that prioritize sustainability. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this discussion. But don't forget, as Dasha invited you earlier, to use the chat to ask your questions. Without further ado, let's begin.
Thank you very much. We're assuming that most of you are on the call because you realize that strategic planning is important. So we're not going to spend a lot of time digging into the data on the ROI and how and why. But I did want to share with you one quote, if we can move to the next slide, which is there was this very interesting study done a few years ago by Dun and Bradstreet. They surveyed hundreds of small businesses that went bankrupt and then compared them to businesses of the same size and type in the same industry and their behaviors from the year prior. And the one distinguishing factor that they were able to find across the businesses was that the thriving businesses were doing just a significantly greater amount of planning across their business compared to the businesses that had gone out of business. And so I just thought that was so powerful because it was such a cross-functional study and they looked at hundreds of businesses. But okay, very quickly, what is strategic planning? In its essence, it's really just 4 things going on a continuing basis. And so one is the organization formally agrees on a set of goals. And these can be dictated top down from the vision of the founder. It could be done through some sort of strategy discovery process where you do a lot of different research, but you have goals and you agree on them. And then you develop an approach for how you're going to achieve those goals. And that's the strategy piece of it, is going from the goals to the how are we going to think about overall, what is it that we're going to prioritize? And then making that into specific actions that need to be taken over time, which is your plan, right? It's actually writing down, documenting, and being very clear on how you're going to go about when you're going to do what. And last, but absolutely not least, is also agreeing on how are you going to evaluate your progress against those goals, not just in terms of your plan, but also other measures that you're going to be putting in place to see whether or not your plan is working. And as you go through the cyclicality of this, so you figure out an approach, you start to take action against it, you measure if it's working against your overall goals, you start to now discover not only is your plan and approach the right plan and approach to get you to your goals, but also are your goals actually the goals that your organization benefits from the most. And so if you do this process continuously over time, your team gets really good at actually being more efficient and having better vision about the things that they're doing, learning from the experience in a purposeful way. So that's really the essence of strategic planning. And next. For the purposes of our conversation, we just wanted to have a case study that we could illustrate some of the concepts with. So all of us have worked with SaaS style businesses in a small kind of startup stage. So we kind of made an aggregate type of business that's based on the kinds of businesses that all of us have experience with, which is a Gamma Technologies. It's a health tech SaaS technology that improves how patients have conversations with doctors and nurses in the hospital. But the profile is pretty simple. It's a young business, 2 years old, and has raised some funding. It has a CEO who's a co-founder, a CTO who's a co-founder, and a CFO. A very, very typical experience for a small company to have a team, just a very, very few executives. And it's a B2B business in healthcare. So they have some funding initially, and they're starting to produce revenue, $5 million. And now they have some goals. They need to triple their revenue in 3 years. They need to grow by 50% in the next year. And they want to leverage innovation to expand their market, since being innovative is in the heart of their company. So the problem we're going to be solving and illustrating is, how do you craft a strategic organizational plan to optimize revenue in the short term, but also in the long term? But we'll be talking at kind of a broad level. We're not going to be getting into too many specifics, but using this to illustrate some of the concepts. So now let's talk about that first part, setting goals. And Michelle is going to take it away for us.
Thank you, Dasha. So the key to successful planning is to start with the end in mind. So if we think about what Dasha said was our goal, we want to craft a strategic organizational plan. So we're going to maximize revenues in both the short term and the long term. So the path to successful planning for an organization is really to cascade those goals for the organization all the way down through the organization, and make sure that every functional area goal supports that overall organizational goal. In the case of Gamma Technologies, as Dasha mentioned, the primary goal is they want a 3x revenue in 3 years. The ancillary goals that they want to do to achieve that is to 1.5x revenue in 1 year, and they're going to leverage that innovation to expand those markets. So how do we create those goals? So if we go to to how to plan those goals, we'll see that it starts with the SMART goal. Everybody's probably familiar with that term. It was first presented in 1981 as a better way to set and achieve management goals. The concept has kind of been questioned. Other people are looking at it as maybe a little bit too inflexible. Maybe it's not challenging enough. And some new approaches are, if you've heard of PACT or FAST, they seem to be more trendy these days. But if you look at SMART goals, if they are strategically developed and properly executed, they really are the key to success. So each letter of SMART stands for one of the characteristics that your goals need to embody. So the S, specific. You need to really drill down. What exactly is the goal you want to achieve? Get granular. It needs to be measurable. How much growth? What percentage of savings? How much more efficient? If you cannot measure it, it's not detailed enough. You can't just say we want to grow. How much? It needs to be achievable. It should be a stretch goal, but it needs to be realistically able to be achieved. Otherwise, it's just simply out of reach and it's not going to meet that criteria for achievable. R is relevant. For it to be a SMART goal, it needs to advance your organization or your functional area towards getting to your next goal. It needs to be closely tied to those objectives. T is for time bound. It's got to have an accomplished by date. So a plan without a deadline is just a wish. It's not really a plan. So it's got to have that time bound factor. So if we can look at the next slide, we will look at, it's not just top-down planning, it's also got to be across the organization. So when you're doing that planning, the organization has typically 1 to 3 goals. We talked about Gamma technology. Dasha mentioned there's 3 goals. You really don't want to go any thinner than, you don't want to spread yourself any thinner than that because you really want to focus on what's most important. Each functional area, whether it has a leader or not, there are various functional areas in every single organization. Even if you are the founder and you're doing it all, you have finance responsibilities, you have technology responsibilities, you have sales and marketing responsibilities. Those are all functional areas. Each functional area should have 1 to 3 supporting goals that's going to advance you towards that organizational goal. Should you have more individuals in your organization, like I suspect a lot of you do, leverage those internal resources for those cross-functional departments so that you can get there faster. Communication is the key here. You want to remain in sync with each other. You want to have those established cross-functional communications, a cadence of meetings. Why is that important? Well, if you add communication and collaboration, you're going to have a healthy organization and one that achieves more. Okay, if we can move on. Okay, so let me bring this to life for you. This is what a goal cascade looks like. Top-down planning. If you look at the mission and vision to help craft those organizational goals, Virginia's going to talk to you a little bit about the mission and vision for Gamma Technologies in just a minute, but I'm going to kind of foreshadow that for you. They put patients first. It is healthcare. They strive for innovation, and sustainability is also very important to them. The 3 organizational goals that they've established are strategic in nature. Each functional area to support that organizational goal should have 2 to 4 strategic goals. Now, I've only listed 3 functional areas here for the sake of visual simplicity. I put finance, sales, and technology. Those are pretty relatable. So if we look at sales, so we've highlighted that into a little bit darker color. 2 strategic examples for this particular case study. They want to enter new markets. We're going to, for example, say new products and services. That would be something innovative. They also want to move up market and go after larger prospects. So to take that a step further, you take those strategic goals for the functional area, and you're going to add 3 to 5 tactical goals. How are you going to achieve that strategic goal? In this case, examples, target larger practices, maybe also healthcare systems, and expand different geographies. What are you going to need for that? You're going to need data. You're probably going to have to make sure your CRM is up to speed. You may need financing. So who are you going to call? You're going to call Prudy. She's your data expert. You're going to call Virginia. She's going to help you decide what markets you're going to go after. And of course, this is all after you've consulted Dasha as your chief strategy officer, because she's helped you decide which geographies, which markets. You've got to involve all of them. The second tactical move, you've got to create more targeted messaging, because these are new markets. You've got to make sure that if you're going after different account size and different personas, you've got to be on target with that. Again, that handshake between sales and marketing, it's got to be cross-functional. You've got to be in sync. And third, you want to realign the sales team so that you can base that on skill sets, on account size, and make sure you can maximize your productivity and results. Again, you need data. Prudy, you're on deck again. You probably need to involve HR. And you are also going to want, again, strategy, marketing, technology. You're going to have to cut the data, slice it, dice it, set up the CRM. So, of course, we can't forget about ops. They've got to be involved. So this is why you need cross-functional. This is why you need to drill down. This is why you need SMART goals. Okay. Now, I mentioned that Virginia's going to get involved in quite a bit, but let's start off talking about the mission and vision and how that drives all of this.
Thanks, Michelle, for this sales perspective. If you go to the next slide. Yes, as a fractional CMO, so my take is slightly different. I often come into organizations and teams who already have a clear view of what they want to achieve, a little bit like in this case study. They know the revenue goals, maybe the market penetration. And before I'm able to drive success with marketing strategies and campaigns, we have to do a deep dive on the underlying or unconscious bias and limits that would prevent success. So I do that by using a 3-question approach. What is your brand value? What are your brand values? What is your brand story? And who is your audience? Before we look at what it means for Gamma Gamma Technology Company, our case study, I want to add some context. So brand value, what values does your brand uphold? What principles does your brand and team stand by? To me, tactic and prioritization are shaped by our brand values. And as an example, we all know Patagonia, the brand. Well, their values are on environmental sustainability and ethical business practices. That's why the company places such a strong emphasis on corporate social responsibility and also works to promote environmental awareness and activism. So their brand values influence, if not dictate, their planning strategy. It's almost like a bridge between what you truly care about and what you manufacture. The brand story, what is your brand story? Who we think we are and our perception of our company story is significantly affect our capacity to develop and expand. And as a side note, you may not be aware of this, but in the 1960s, or maybe you are, in the 1960s, Nokia was a conglomerate selling everything from toilet paper to car tires. It really took their owners and the executive team a new story to venture into telecommunication. I often meet companies who are willing to go to the next phase of growth, but they're constrained and tied up by their old story. And then the last one is audience. Who is the audience you're choosing to serve? In my experience, having a deep understanding of the audience will determine how the planning is executed and prioritized. So now going to the case study, Gamma Gamma Technology, to the next slide, here's what it looks like for them. Brand value. Yes, Michelle mentioned that their brand value is patient first, innovation, and sustainability. Now, the backstory, in order for the brand value to be so crisp and clear, there's a backstory that it's part of the work that I would have done. which is that their founders deeply care about the environment and they're very mindful of all the energy usage in the tech industry. So they had decided to use a green energy data center and create, which is very interesting, energy saving features in their code from the beginning. So this is going to impact their go-to-market strategy. The second is the brand story. Their focus is on tech above all else. Of course, the founding team are serial entrepreneurs, engineers, passionate about technology. So they know their strength. They excel at rapid innovation, creative thinking. They're even open to taking risk, which is great and will help us determine how to prioritize some of those tactic and campaign. But they have to be mindful of their own shortcoming. They're so focused on tech that they will be disconnected from people and from their patient. And then the last thing is audience that they want to serve. They did start building their company with smaller accounts, which was easier to close, but now they aim to engage larger accounts. Those larger accounts will expect greater company stability, which means one, longer sales cycle, and two, having some reassuring communications. So all of this will influence the tactics selected in the go-to-market strategy. So now that the goals are aligned with the brand values and its mission, it's time to prioritize, which Dasha, as a fractional planning strategy and planning officer, I think it's one of your core expertise. So I'll leave it to
thank you, Virginie. And one thing I just want to quickly follow up on in terms of the values and the story of the company, there's a couple questions that came through on Zoom around change management. And there's a lot that goes into that word change management. But when you think about the history of your company, and we've been using Gamma technology, which is 2 years old, so relatively new, but many customers we might work with are 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old companies. That's history and story of the company. It's not just it's not just a story on paper, right? This is the people have been comprising and doing these things. And so when you're setting goals and you're trying to do something ambitious and new, the values and the history of the company significantly influence what the talent is capable of and or what their mindsets are. And so you always have to be really mindful when you're creating strategy of that history and of those values that people are living, because sometimes you might have to change or overcome some of those things. You might be pivoting away from certain things. And that's where really the change management comes in, because you're changing hearts and minds and habits, and you might be adding talent or asking people to stretch. So that's, the change management really comes in at the diagnosis level, and that starts with the values. So one technique that I really wanted to talk about is, once you kind of establish the overall goals and the approach, which comes from your values and your mission, now you're getting into the tactics, and the tactics can feel like there are infinite possibilities, right? When you go into a plan, on one hand, there's things that you've been doing before, and those things you don't want to just repeat what you've been doing because you're trying to do something bigger and newer, but you also don't want to get bogged down with all of the possibilities, because there really is so many different ways you can tackle any problem. And if you have a team that's very creative, you're probably going to see a lot of different options. So I think one of the things that can really help is to have structured creativity. So you want to be thoughtful and put down lots of ideas on paper for things you could do, but you want to do it within some sort of framework or structure that immediately helps you dice and slice those things up. So here's 8 categories I think are critical to think about whenever you're planning, whether you're planning at the company level or now you're planning at the functional department level. First of all, every area has foundations to preserve. These are things that absolutely have to be done because they are the foundation of what your operation is. Second, there's innovation or expansion projects. These are things that stretch everybody in terms of their capabilities, their creativity. Maybe it's a pivot, maybe it's something that requires lots of hiring. These things, you want to categorize them as this, because you don't ever want to be doing too many innovation and expansion projects at the same time. They take so much energy to do mentally, and creativity, and they tend to have a risk involved because they're so ambiguous and so much innovation is involved. You also want to be thoughtful about operational milestones that might be outside of your control, like a company audit if you're in an audit state, or events that impact the entire company, like large industry conferences or things like that need to be done, and they might not be coming from your functional area, but you should be aware of them, which is, well, that communication that Michelle was talking about between departments. Also note down creative alternatives. There might be interesting ideas that pop up through the process of planning that just for whatever reason aren't the ones that you're going to pursue, but you want to put them in your back pocket as your plan B, plan C. Sometimes you might have to pivot or change, and now you have to take a note of other things you could do that could potentially advance you towards your goal. Absolutely take note of things that are called low-hanging fruit, which is like easy fixes, right? It's like, hey, if we just do this one thing, it's actually going to really advance us pretty far, and we just haven't gotten around to do it. Let's do it now. Those are the things you want to prioritize if you can to do first, because then once they're done, you're building on that foundation. Also take note of things you can do to systematize and automate. So whenever you're building a company, if you can make certain things more, either there's a process that you document that makes things easier, or you can put in a system that automates, you're now going to be freeing up. Once you do that, you're freeing up time for yourself or your team to go and spend more time on innovation and expansion. So you want to make sure those things are categorized so that they're sprinkled throughout to help you build that scalability in your team. Team values, attitudes, and also add in their skills, basically talent-related projects. If you are growing a company, you have to be growing your talent. That could include hiring, but sometimes it includes teaching people new skills, giving people stretch projects, or sometimes even changing the mindset of your team, right? You might have to say, okay, we have been so focused on creating our innovative product, but now we're going to be going after these big clients that have a lot of bureaucracy. We need to change our mindset so that we are very open and very persistent in how we work with them, and we don't feel that interrupts our innovation, but that in fact working with these clients actually helps us, right? So you might have to overcome some of those biases that you've developed as a team, and you have to do that consciously, and that should be a part of your plan. It shouldn't be something that you assume just kind of happens. You actually want to give it some thought, some reinforcement, have a few small tactical strategies for addressing that by having the meeting with the team, or doing a session that trains, or interviewing a customer, whatever that specific tactic might be. But you can address it consciously. And then you do want to take note of things that you're not going to do, things that are low ROI, high risk, not a priority. And if you're already doing some of those things, which sometimes happens, sometimes your team is working on something that as you develop a strategy, you realize is probably not the most important project. You want to consciously stop doing it. You want to put things in the bucket of, we are not, for sure, we're not doing this right now because we don't have the time, or it's too risky, or we don't have the money or whatever to do it, and we're not going to spend our attention on it. So not doing things is just as important as doing things when you're creating a strategy, because it's all about prioritization and being very conscious. All right. So categorize before you prioritize, and hopefully this will also help stimulate some of the creative thinking around, oh, you know what, this project fits into this category. Let me actually note it down as an option for us to do. All right, next slide. And so Dr. Crudy is going to talk to us about now, how do we move on from the plan items to actually informing that with data?
So hi, I think based on what Virginie and Michelle and Dasha have laid out, one of the things that I'm sure y'all heard coming up multiple times is data-related terms. And I'm trying not to make this super boring, because we could keep talking about ROIs and deciding which people need to be retrained, moved around. But the point is that at the bottom of any business, whether it is successful or whether it has failures in it. Is data that captures this information meaningfully? So the first step that I would do if I was, working with Gamma would be to look at their historical data. What were their successes? What were their failures? Why did they succeed? Why did they fail? Look at the market data. Is it connecting with what their vision is? Kind of going back to what Michelle and Virginie said. If you're strategizing, if you're planning, it is important to look at who you're serving, right? Looking at marginal costs and benefits. Is a service or a product that is being used by the company worth it? Because sometimes you can hire a service thinking it's the most efficient way to do it. You haven't considered what else could be out there. Financial data typically is handled by the CFO, but that's where a data science officer would go in and work with the CFO, the CTO, be like, all right, what does this mean for us? How do we go from here? Where do we go? And making the recommendations as a part of the strategy and the planning rather than an afterthought, right? And most importantly, because this is the healthcare industry, what needs to be considered is you might have data on people or customers or clients, but does the policy allow you to use that data? Because if you're using data that you're not allowed to use, you are exposing yourself to a lot of other risks. So taking all of that into account, my DARE model, and AcornOak has the wonderful blog post explaining this in more detail, is where it takes the data and places it at the base, at the foundation of a lot of the decision making. And the reason that is the case is this is where the treasure is. All the strategies, all this brilliance that is in the executive team requires access to something that can help them quantify, help them measure, going back to the SMART goals, going back to the categorizing and prioritizing, finding what is the low-hanging fruit and making those decisions. So let the executive team be in the center, but with data on the one side and the departments on the other. And there's a cyclical, circular process that can be followed to continuously improve the quality of data, improve what insights we're getting from the data, and making the decisions that are data-driven, not only because we want to call them data-driven decisions or, oh, we use Google Analytics. No, but because you want to know why you're succeeding when you succeed and why you're failing when you don't succeed, and how to get past those failures with the help of this treasure of information that your company already has. So I'm going to hand it back to Dasha.
Thank you. Yeah. So before we move on, I just we have a couple questions that came in through the chat and also a few from Zoom that relate to kind of this stage of the planning process. So I'm going to go through a couple of the questions from the audience. The first question we have, if you're a CEO, so I'm sure some of the people here are, you have a team of mid-level managers, how do you drive a successful process to ensure high-level input from all? And I think I'll start by tackling this, and then we'll kind of have round robin, different people answering questions. So first of all, this is a very common situation to have, let's say, a team of people who have different levels of knowledge or training on planning, right? Many people, even in executive roles, let's say in smaller companies, 50, 150 people, it's very common for an executive to be somebody who rises through the ranks, who has a lot of technical knowledge, expertise in that company, in that area, but not necessarily have gotten any formal planning training. And, you can even have an MBA and not necessarily spend a lot of time learning how to do strategic planning. There's so many things to learn about it. So it's very common to have a team that has different levels of planning experience. So one thing that really helps is, in fact, training. And that doesn't necessarily mean formal training. You send everybody to workshop. That could mean you start by making quarterly plans and you have everybody show you what they're doing and you coach them. If you're a CEO who knows how to plan, or you bring in a coach to, or somebody on your team maybe is a program manager, really good at planning, right? You have them work with with the managers that need a little bit of help and need a little bit of practice through a couple of reps of quarterly planning, right? Before you move on to doing like a full annual type of plan or a multi-year plan, you do the reps in smaller pieces until you feel that there's a baseline of quality that's achieved across the team and how they plan. And also you can set up some of the cadences and start putting together some reporting and metrics and cross-collaborative types of conversations where people share what they're doing, so that the practice of getting together and talking about plans and progress is established in your team. As your managers start to come into this, you are now creating a habit. You're also up-leveling everybody's skill. And you're starting to do some of that change management for, this is how we're going to work together now. We're going to do things a little differently. This is what's expected. And then once you start seeing kind of a consistency and a vibe emerge from that, now you're ready for that next level of planning. And you're going to be able to see that people are starting to contribute better ideas. They're starting to know how to participate. Some people might be a little bit less, and you have to coach people, because it's not something that just comes right away, right? So if you see somebody's really good at planning, have them work with the person who's less good. If you see somebody has really good ideas, have them work with somebody else. If you see somebody is good at using data, have them work with a person who's maybe not relying on data, so that the exchange of skills is purposefully driven in your team. Anybody else want to contribute to that one?
Yeah, I'd like to underscore some of the things that you mentioned, but also give just a slightly different perspective. Yes, it starts with training and coaching, and of course, the cornerstone of everything, communication. But I want to take a slightly different approach as an executive, especially if you're a founder of the company. It really is your responsibility to bring up the skill set of every other member of your team, whether there's 3 people on your team or 300 on your team. For the success of your organization, you need to have successful people. You need to have trained people. You have to have educated people. So bring those skill sets throughout your organization. I talked about top-down and cross-functional. This is the same type of thing. If you don't have the skills for planning, you need to get them. You then need to coach and train your next level managers. They need to coach and train their next level and communicate all the way. As Dasha said, it needs to be part of your culture. If it's not currently, as Dasha said, it needs to become part. Everybody needs to get used to it. It is part of change management. It's got to be ingrained in your company that planning is a way of life. And it will take some time, but it's going to lead to your success, your company's success, your team's success. And it's going to bring engagement and commitment.
The next question we have is, how does this process work when a fractional executive is in your company? How does a fractional executive participate? So, Virginie, if you'd like to take that on.
Kruti, do you want to start?
I'm just going to say that the beauty of a fractional is that they are an objective outsider to your company. They didn't found your company. They weren't a part of the initial team. But that means that they can objectively look at the information that is provided to you, ask you the right questions that have not been asked before, because it's an outsider at the end of the day. But the beauty of fractionals lies in the fact that once they get these answers, they are just as vested in the success of the company as you are, while maintaining this ability to take a step back without getting personally involved, like, Michelle and Dasha said at the beginning. A fractional allows a lot of outside skills to be brought to the table as a part of the strategy, as a part of the planning, as a part of putting the future together, improving the processes, improving communications, whatever the fractional has been hired for, and then handing you all that beauty in a package when they're not required there anymore. You know, I mean, as a fractional myself, that is the best part about being a fractional. It's like, I fixed your problem, but now I'm out of here. I'll see you for lunch or dinner one of these days, right? So I think that fractionals allow for a very cost-effective measure and a very objective measure to make strategic decisions and changes when a company is pursuing higher growth. Virginie, what do you think?
And I would say kind of the same thing. I mean, Dasha, you mentioned exchange of skills. And I think that's when, as a fractional, I've been called just to do not so much as a chief marketing officer marketing, but really to hand the annual wide planning strategy with marketing and sales. So because I was exterior of the company, the stake, I was not trying to keep my job, my career, but I was really here with a very honest perspective. And if the team is already too busy doing what they need to do, having someone to come just to manage this strategy and planning session, I think is a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, great. And then another question that just came in, it's kind of similar to the first one, but how do you handle situations where companies, particular people on leadership team, don't want to spend time on strategic planning, and or they think they have a plan, but not to this degree. And I'll speak from personal experience. Before I was a fractional, I've actually run into this situation several times in my full-time job where I've done strategic planning for companies. And it's very common for companies to think they have a plan and then to realize they don't once they go through the full experience. And so I think the key is, you don't have to always start from that annual, again, you don't have to start at, we make a multi-annual plan with all the bells and whistles right away, right? So figure out what the baseline is. What is their current planning? If you're coming into a company as a consultant or a fractional, or if you're a CEO coming in, or maybe you're a new executive that brought in and you notice this and you're trying to change it a little bit, figure out what is the baseline, and then work with the founder or the CEO to just make incremental changes one at a time until you feel that the company is then ready and the team is ready to take on that bigger project. Doing strategic planning, it is very energy. It requires a lot of effort from everybody, and it not only requires time, but it does require new ways of thinking, new skills and practices. And it also, you have to be constantly refocusing on it. So there's an energy expenditure aspect. You're usually changing something about the company. And so there is an energy investment into that, an emotional investment, you might even say, that happens. And so you should not expect that you just come in, bam, everything is an annual, to get to a point where your company can do a really great annual plan. Everybody needs to get trained up to be ready. And so small steps are great steps. But if the company does feel ready, and there's nobody to really take a hold of that or wrangle it, this is kind of where my role comes in. So I come in and I help figure out that baseline and figure out what skills everybody needs and get the team to go through the process, whether it's incremental or one huge leap. I will say there is one little thing I've done in companies that really helps the team understand whether or not they really have a strategy and plan, and which is a very simple exercise. But I take the team and give everybody some sticky notes and say, write down what you think the top 3 goals of the company are. And what do you think the top 3 risks the company is facing are? And what do you think the top 3 opportunities are for the company to go after? And what you find is, if the company's been going through a strategic process, you'll find the answers are basically aligned. If the company is not actually in a good place in terms of strategy, everybody's going to have their own idea of goals. The CEO is going to be thinking differently from the CTO, and everybody's going to be looking at things from their own perspectives of their functional area. You'll see a lot of that. And then also you'll see that people don't have the same language around it. So somebody will be saying, oh, these are opportunities. Somebody else will be seeing things as risks. And other people will be seeing things as goals that are opportunities, but aren't actually the company's goals. They're just new, shiny things. So doing that exercise can really help a team see, oh, wow, we really don't have this well articulated even to ourselves. We're obviously all rowing in a sort of similar direction, but really not exactly in the same direction. We might need to become a little bit more purposeful about this.
So I actually have a tip for how to get your leader to start thinking strategically rather than just tactically or small picture. And this is what I do when a potential client speaks to me about a problem that they need to fix, but they really haven't gotten to the core of it. A lot of times I'll be called to coach a sales team because a founder thinks that they need more sales. Absolutely. Been coaching for years and years. So I'll speak to them and I'll say, okay, well, tell me about this. How is this working for you? Oh, wow. Never thought about that. Okay. Well, tell me what data source you're using. Oh, well, it's not really good. Well, tell me about your CRM. How are you tracking this information? Well, we don't really have one. Well, what about your marketing? Tell me about your marketing. They realize it's not coaching they need. It's a bigger picture. So when your leader is kind of reluctant to think big picture and think strategy and make those strategic goals, delicately, subtly, politely, start asking those questions. Kind of prompt them that way. See if that helps them look at the bigger picture, the question behind the question. That might get them thinking along the same lines as you.
All right, great. I know we also have a few other questions, but I do want to kind of move forward a little bit and answer. And then also, if anybody does ask a question that we don't answer here, we'll follow up over email with specific answers to all the rest of the questions. So we'll make sure everything gets answered, even if it's not in the session. So, but
You're muted, Desha.
I've been muted this whole time.
No,
Just now.
Oh, just now, accidentally. So let's move on to the next part of our presentation, which is going to be about what do you do after you have your plan. So let's say you have a plan and now you're in execution mode. You might be wondering, first of all, how do you approach the iterative type of planning discipline, which is called agile, or the waterfall type of planning where things are a little bit more structured? Because you hear a lot of different great terms and best practices and why you should be agile versus why you should be waterfall. These things do make a little bit of a difference as you go through and execute, because it actually influences how you report and how you adapt your plan over time. So just want to kind of address that, especially I know we have some CTOs who probably are more used to the agile planning methodology. So the big difference between agile and waterfall, for anybody who doesn't have the background, is agile is highly iterative. You make a minimum viable product, you show it. You take a next iteration, you show it to the customer, and you do things in this sort of constantly looping fashion. Versus waterfall methodology means you plan out most of the project right away, and there's very little ambiguity or changes following afterwards. And both of these are very important in the overall company planning. So agile is particularly valuable for things that involve early product development, things where there is a data involved and dashboards and a user interface, and there's an interpretation of the results involved. Whenever you're rolling out processes or software to the company, you have a change management aspect that you're also managing at the same time, and you're trying to learn what's going to work best for the company. So being iterative, doing a pilot, doing changes after a pilot, that's a great way to approach that. And anything that impacts the customer experience, very important to be careful and slow and to take feedback back from that. So if you're going to change some of your marketing, if you're going to change your customer service processes, those things can be done in small bits and pieces, get the feedback, then do the rest of the plan once you figure out if it's going to work or not. Now, for waterfall methodologies, there are certain things that just don't work in that kind of iterative way. If you're building out your building, you're relocating, or you're hiring talent, you don't, move half of your company, then move it back to the old building. That wouldn't make sense. And then for hiring and talent, for the most part, you want to actually commit, right? You don't want to be like hiring, firing. So unless, of course, you have small projects or things, in which case you might want to do, consulting, or maybe you want a fractional to try out a new role. But for most hiring, it's going to be like we're gonna stepwise through it. Hardware and manufacturing, there is more of an agile approach possible nowadays with things like 3D printing, but it's really it is more of a waterfall methodology. And anything that's large scale project with very clearly set requirements is going to use the waterfall. Now, overall, you still want to be thinking of your annual strategic planning as having kind of an adaptable, evolving aspect to it. You don't want to just feel like you've committed overall to everything and now you can't change. You want to feel that you can change, that you can set a strategy and then realize, okay, this is not what we thought this would be producing. This is where the data really is important and comes in, because the whole overall purpose of the strategy isn't just to get to the goals faster, of course, but to learn along the way as much as you can so that learning can get compounded. And you don't just do it well once, but now you will have built a practice of being purposeful, fast, and constantly learning. You're basically creating a learning organization by using strategic planning. So that's kind of on the implementation. Now, there's a really difficult question we want to answer as well. So Virginie, take it away.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yes. Well, absolutely. I'm glad we're being a little controversial because, after all, challenging our own belief is one way to innovate. So does planning kill creativity? My answer is yes, it can, if we overlook two things. So the first is we forget to look at the larger game. There's always a larger game. And as a marketing leader, you might be thinking that you're planning one game, but it's only part of a larger game. So rather than viewing planning, strategic planning through the limiting lens of marketing, there's a benefit in a more holistic approach planning, which can mean for marketing integrating sales, product, or finance. And that is true for all heads of department. The second is planning kills creativity when we create predictable patterns. And what I mean by that is that marketing and communication plans typically aim to maximize campaign output within a budget. And to do that, we often get into planning patterns. But the challenge is that in our current market, where there's an overwhelming amount of information and choices available, the new game to stand out is to be unpredictable and surprise, so you can outsmart your competitors and, most importantly, overcome the noise of the market. So that means at the last second, you randomly pick between the options. So your competitors can't predict what you'll do. You mix things up. The key is to be unpredictable. And I'm going to give you a couple of unpredictable campaigns for communication and marketing. So the first one is flash sales or mystery offers. Offering surprise flash sales with limited time discount to create a sense of urgency and attract immediate attention is one way. The mystery offers will tease customers where the exact deal is revealed only upon clicking on or engaging with the marketing materials. Another unpredictable campaign can be what I call random act of kindness. you unexpectedly gifting loyal customers with personalized surprises, and that will create a positive emotion connection. And then maybe one last, which is to me fascinating, it's limited edition collaboration. So that means you partner with unexpected influencers or brand for limited edition collaborations that will capture the customer's attention. So to determine which approach is suitable for your brand, you have to remember that the most successful brand design their experience around the customer's pattern of engagement with their company. And that's really one of the focus to keep in mind when you do strategic planning and consider marketing and communication plans. So that's my take on, does planning kills creativity?
Perfect. Thank you, Virginie. We have a couple more questions. I know we're right at the hour, so I know a lot of people will probably be dropping off, but we'll stick around to just finish up if there's any questions. There is one that just came in, and the question is, if a company is a startup and they just have two founders, like a CEO, a COO, how does our firm AcornOak engage with them, and how does a company like that work with a fractional, particularly on things related to marketing and or sales?
Virginie, would you like to start, or shall I?
Sure. And I was going to say, maybe we can show the last slide, which has all our contact information. AcornOak is a community and marketplace of fractional executive women. So when you need a fractional executive, you connect with us. We'll match, after having a short conversation, 2 to 3 profiles that best fit what your organization is looking for, not just from a skill standpoint, but also from a personality. And the uniqueness of AcornOak is that we are a community first and foremost. So we are all here to help each other in our own fractional practice, because being a fractional executive or consultant is a very lonely, experience. And how do you keep up with technology? The fact that we are all surrounded by other excellent peers, it means that we have access to framework, we share best practices, we help each other, we can pick our brain, and that allows us to deliver excellence in our work. And I can only tell you that not all fractional are created equals. There are some excellent ones, and there's others. So
if I can add on to that, I don't speak for all fractionals, but I will speak for myself and many of the ones that I've spoken with. We do understand that no business is the mirror image of another, and needs are different, budgets are different, timelines are different. Many of us can adapt what we offer and how we offer it to a particular business's needs. So if you have a need that you think is too small or not the right fit, don't let that stop you from contacting a fractional. There's resources that you need, and there's expertise that you can get. Many of us will customize something that fits your appropriate needs.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to build on from what Virginie and Michelle said is one thing that is truly unique about AcornOak is that we really collaborate closely on projects together. So as you guys see, we put together this presentation collaboratively. We even had contributions from members who are not here in the panel, just to make sure that we've taken in other perspectives from other executive roles that weren't necessarily represented in the panel speakers. And through this process, what we develop is a working relationship between ourselves, working on small projects and building our own ability to collaborate. The benefit that this brings to smaller organizations is sometimes your need isn't just one fractional. Sometimes you need a little bit of different stuff. And so instead of getting a single individual and then wondering, okay, do I now need to find a second person? And is that too expensive? What you have within AcornOak is a group of people that will be able to draw on each other and or even create a customized package of 2 fractionals if you need it. If you need a lot on data and marketing, you might be able to have Kruti and Virginie together share different pieces of the work. And because we work together collaboratively outside of the client work, but for the benefit of our community, AcornOak, we already have that synergy and working relationships built to ensure that when we come in to help a company, we ourselves are able to present a team effort that's, goes beyond 2 different people coming in and having to jive. We already have that as a sense within our community. So feel free to reach out if there are any additional questions, or if you are looking for a fractional executive to help your team with any part of your growth, whether it's marketing, strategy, data, sales, or a combination of other things. We also have, I'm just going to call out, I think, a few people on the call. We have a chief talent and chief HR officers as a part of our team. So if you are looking for that kind of help, we have chief operational officers. We also have a CTO. So there's a variety of expertise within AcornOak community that's represented.
I also see one of our chief creative officers on the call.
And we'll most likely write a blog post as well as share this video on our YouTube channel. We'll have snippet with, the key extraction of maybe nuggets, as there was a lot of good content, a lot of good ideas shared. And I think there's other questions that we haven't had the time to answer, but we will make sure that we answer those questions within the blog post or even directly to the people who've asked. So I really wanted to thank... Sure. Go ahead, Kruti.
Before we leave, I've been thinking about this whole time that we were talking, right? And what I realized is that when times are good, our personalities as individuals or as companies come out. When times are bad is when the character of ourselves or our companies comes out. Strategic planning helps a company build that character, so that even during lean or high time, they're covered. So I just wanted to leave all of us with that thought, because that's what we do.
Exactly. So strategic planning builds resilience in brand and makes them stronger and more sustainable. So thank you for that last nugget of wisdom. I want to thank Dasha for the time for being our host and doing such a wonderful job, bringing various voices and perspective on a topic that is not easy to discuss and share content. And thank you so much, Michelle and Kruti, for sharing your expertise and your point of view. I think that was really well done. So thank you for everyone to attend. Again, we'll share the video and write a blog post. Follow us we are on most social media channels, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, even Instagram. And we look forward in other opportunities to connect with you and share some of our experiences and expertise.